So hello everyone, thanks for your patience. Again, welcome to PM in Theory PMBOK Guide 6th edition. So just a few things to know before we get started. All attendees will be on mute. However, any questions you have are more than welcome. Please feel free to type them into the questions box, which you can find on your GoToWebinar dashboard. And all of our PM webinars are valid for one PDU free of charge. However, you must be in attendance for the full session. PDU certificates will be sent by the end of the day, so please hold off on emailing us about your certificate until then. And for those of you interested in the recording and slides, they'll be sent out via email by tomorrow. And you can also find them within our Project Insight community. So my name is Alexa, and I'll be your moderator for today. I'm on the marketing team here at Project Insight, and if you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please feel free to reach me at alexa.ortega-mendoza@projectinsight.com. And for those of you not familiar with us, Project Insight has been dedicated to developing and providing web-based project management software to help teams work better together for over 15 years. And we'd also like to share that PI was named Best Project Management Solution at this year's SIA Cody Awards for continuing to innovate the project management industry. From our enterprise platform that delivers optimal performance for centralizing projects, to our latest platform, PI Team, our free social project management software, PI has your team covered. If you would like to learn more about our products, please feel free to contact us via phone, email, or request your free customized demo at projectinsight.net. So we'd like to give a warm welcome today to our host, Diane Buckley. Diane is the CEO of Core Performance Concepts. CPC helps companies by training team members in project management, PMP preparation, leadership and business analysis, and Diane has an MBA and PMP and more than 30 years of experience in the PM industry. And we'd also like to give a warm welcome to our presenter, Diane White. Diane is a project management professional and has earned a master's certificate in information technology from George Washington University. She recently retired from Verizon Corporation, where she managed projects, programs, and portfolios for over 20 years in the information technology and telecommunications industry. Diane is heavily involved with the Project Management Institute and currently teaches, develops courses, and consults in the project management field. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to our two presenters today. So hi.
Good morning. Good morning, Alexa. We have both Dianes here this morning. How are you?
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. So we're going to hand it over to Diane White. So Diane, you're going to take over from here. You've got, I think the other Diane, Alexa.
All right, here we go.
Right. All right. So thank you for joining this morning, everyone. And we're here to talk about the changes for the PMBOK guide, and we're kind of calling it changes you can use, because the emphasis is going to be on, in part, how to use the PMBOK guide as a reference tool in your everyday job as project managers, and also to talk about ways that it's going to impact those of you who are looking for your PMP certification. And so those are going to be our main emphasis. We're going to start with looking at the changes that have been incorporated in the 6th edition. And this first webinar is the theory part, and then the second one in 2 weeks will be the in practice. So we're going to give you a lot of the theory concepts, but at the end, for those of you who, especially who are going to be getting your PMP this year, maybe before or maybe after the deadline in March, but there's some sample questions so you can test yourself. It's a good way for those of you to refresh. If you have your PMP already, how would you do on the new material? So you can quiz yourself. We'll have a poll, and you can put your answer in, and you can compare yourself to everybody else and see how we did. So those are the objectives for this morning. So from an overview perspective, the PMBOK 6th edition incorporates the latest research and current practices in the profession, and the PMI, Project Management Institute, and the volunteer update team are really, their goal, their mission is to ensure that the profession, that we all stakeholders in meets the standards that are current and relevant in that goes on in corporations and businesses and nonprofits and governments today. So they really want to, you know, everybody says, well, why do they keep changing it? Why do they update it? Well, we want it to reflect the profession, the best practices, especially. And as we know, and we've heard in the literature, and I'm sure as you're experiencing in your own projects, there's a big emphasis on different methodologies like agile or different adaptive or iterative methods. And the new 6th edition does incorporate agile principles in and recognizes those, and really incorporates a lot of the principles, the tools, the techniques of agile, and blends them, incorporates them with the tools and techniques, the processes, the procedures that we know and love from the 5th edition and from the earlier ones too. I don't know how many of you have been involved with earlier editions, but I know I've been through a few myself. So as I mentioned, the 6th edition updates tools and techniques. They went through and they looked at everyone, and if a tool or technique wasn't being used that much, they replaced it or updated, refreshed the tools and techniques with those in current use. And at the end of the PMBOK, the 6th edition, there's a nice cross-reference grid which takes each tool and technique and kind of categorize them and tells them for what area, what process to use that tool and technique. And if you turn to that grid in the back and study that or take a look at that, if you know that you're in planning or if you know you're in cost, you kind of look at that and say, is there a different technique, a new technique, or maybe one I haven't thought of or used in a while? And that's one way you can use it as a reference guide. And as I mentioned, they do include some agile techniques like sprint and iterative planning are some examples there. And a lot of tools and techniques are put into logical groups like data gathering or data analysis. So you can kind of think of the technique, especially if you're studying for the exam, think of the category of the technique that it's in to say, oh, this is data gathering. This is what I use maybe in planning or to get information, as opposed to maybe data analysis or data representation. Is really how to display. How do you like show this information? So that's really handy. And I like the fact that they group them into categories. What is the impact of the PMP exam? I'm sure a lot of you are curious about that. Well, it's still based on the current exam content outline. This dated from June 2015. And I know that some people, you're looking to get your PMP, and they may not be aware yet that the exam is really based on a document called the exam content outline. And although the PMBOK guide is a primary source or primary reference, it's not the only reference for the PMP exam. So what you really need to do is go back and look at the exam content outline if you're studying for the exam either before March or after March, because that's really your Bible. That's what the knowledge that you have to know. But it is confusing that we have an exam content outline for 2015. Then we've got a PMBOK guide, 6th edition, and we've got the 5th edition. So how do they all work together? So we'll work through all of those questions today.
Hey, Diane. Hey,
Yes.
Diane. Hey, it's Diane. How about that? On this one, you mentioned you can go download it. Where's the best place to go download some of this information to gather?
Yes, absolutely. You can download the exam content outline if you go to pmi.org and look under certifications for PMP. And much of this information also applies to CAPM too. You can go to the CAPM certification and download. They have a different content outline, but the process is the same. Go to the PMP certification link, download your exam content outline, download your guide, the handbook guide for the PMP. The handbook guide tells you the process. What's the timeline? How much does it cost? What if I get audited? It has all that procedure information, the handbook. But the exam content outline, which you'll find on that same page, has all the information about what is in, what do I need to study for the exam. So as I mentioned, and thanks you for reminding me about that, Diane. As I mentioned, the exam will change. The exact date we have now, which is March 26th. So those of you who are thinking about it, or maybe you've already studied starting the 5th edition, then you want to take it before March 26th. So please, please, please put a timeline together, and also be sure that you get an appointment. Appointments are going to get scarce. Your preferred site, your preferred time of day may go quickly. So put a study plan together.
Especially if you live in a very populated area.
Yes, you may have to go to travel further, like, you know, I live in Tampa, so I may have to go to, I don't know, someplace maybe Orlando, you know, it just depends, and you're right. I may have to go to Bradenton, maybe a less populated area. But all that information is on, you can see the appointments online, you can go and see what's available, and again, make your study plan and make your appointment. As soon as you get your application accepted, you can go in there and make your appointment. So get that application in, get in the pipeline, and get it approved, and then you get your exam date, and then you just make your timeline against that. And you can also, before I forget to mention, sorry about that, you can also, download still the 5th edition. I know I get that question a lot too so far, is that yes, until the 26th, till the exam changes, you can still download the 5th edition. You still use the 5th edition. And so that's still available. So for a period of time, about 6 months or so, both editions are available. Both editions are available. So if you're one of those that say, I just don't think I can make it by March 26th, I'm going to plan for maybe April, May, June, then you'd be on the 6th edition. So those of you getting your PMP now, between now and March 26th, exam content outline 2015, and your PMBOK 5th edition. Those of you who are taking the exam after March 26th, then you want, or on or after March 26th, same exam content outline, that's not going to change, and you'll be on the PMBOK 6th edition. So what will change on or after March 26th is that, yes, we'll be using the 6th edition, and the questions from PMI has told us that the questions will be updated and aligned to new processes. The new process we're going to talk about, we'll walk you through that, the new tools and techniques and terminology. So there will be changes to the exam. We know that. They've already been putting out, their sample questions and doing their analysis to make sure that their questions are all validated before they come online March 26th. So we always remember PMBOK, the PMP exam is based on the exam content outline. You download that from your PMI site that has your PMP certification information. All right, so hopefully that overview, those of you who are thinking about the exam have a plan. You know what PMBOK to download. You know that you download your exam content outline and your handbook, and you're good to go. Any questions before we move on? Any questions about the impact of the exam? Everybody know what version they need to be studying?
So currently we don't have any questions yet.
Great. Okay. Okay, remember that, the PMP exam is not a test solely of the PMBOK guide. It's not a test only on the PMBOK guide. That's a primary reference, but look at the reference sheet in the PMBOK guide. It'll have a list of references, and for example, the practice guide for scheduling, is a reference, for example. So you want to be sure you're familiar with the other references, and good, good project management practice as well.
So Diane, we actually did get a question. Do you
Okay.
suggest a study plan to pass the exam?
Oh, absolutely. To me, what we recommend is treat studying for the exam as a project. You have an end in mind, you have your exam date. You have your intro milestones, your application, application accepted, and then you want to make a study plan for so many chapters, so many practice exams. So make a timeline, make your milestones, make your intro milestones, treat it like a project, use Excel, Microsoft Project, or whatever tool that you want. Print it out, put it on your wall, put it in your home office, wherever it's visible. Tell your friends and family, make a commitment to this just like you would do any other project. All right, now we're going to get into the just a general overview of what's changed with the 6th edition. Chapters 1 and 2 were significantly rewritten and new information was added. Chapter 1 contains information, it's refreshed, it's a more detailed and new information on life cycle, project phases, phase gates. There's also information on selecting development methodologies or approaches, predictive, iteration, adaptive methodology. So there's, again, updated, refreshed with current practices and some, future trends as well. There's a big emphasis on the importance of business documents and business benefits management. And we saw that with the content outline of 2015, an exam content outline, which is based on a study. They actually research and poll practitioners all over the world. So it's based on current practice and they based on research, what people are actually doing. So we saw this emphasis with the exam content outline in 2015. We're also seeing it being folded into the PMBOK Guide 6th edition. Again, it's a stronger connection to business benefits and business documents. So you'll see that melding, you'll see that emphasis in the introductory chapters. Chapter 2 talks about the environment in which projects operate, includes things like governance and organizational structure types. That area on the types of structures where projects live has been greatly enhanced, and I think it makes it more clear than the 5th edition. That's my opinion anyway. And there's a new chapter, just chapter 3 is a new section on the project manager's role. It emphasizes the skills project manager needs, and it ties in and actually references PMI's talent triangle. So it talks about the technical skills, the business skills, the leadership skills that you need, and ties into the talent triangle. And those of you perhaps who already have a PMP, or as soon as you get your PMP, you'll have to keep current in professional development units. You'll have to get PDUs. So the PDUs now have to be aligned to this areas of the talent triangle. So it goes into that and talks about the role of the PM, which is a major focus of chapter 3. So that's all brand new. It had pieces of information in 5th edition, but this is really structured, so it's all in one chapter.
And one of the things I noticed as I went through it too is just a lot of the things that we've been talking about with all of our webinars is the role of that project manager and how PMI is really kind of trying to elevate that role. We perform a significant strategic function in organizations today. And if you look at some of the Pulse articles that PMI puts out, on the importance of project management and the strategic importance of project management, that's why I see that whole new chapter about the role of the project manager. It kind of brings that to the forefront and really highlights the fact that we play a vital role in business success.
Absolutely, absolutely, and goes back to the vital role that we play in making sure that our projects provide the business benefits that we're supposed to deliver, that we've been tasked to deliver. Absolutely, and definitely a more strategic role for project managers. And you'll see that on exam questions. So when you're going and answering questions. Think about that role and how important it is. And again, that's one of those PMI philosophies that you always want to answer the questions based on the philosophy of what PMI is trying to tell us and try to guide us as to what project managers do. Okay, so now we're going to get into the different areas in the knowledge areas, or the KAs as we affectionately call them, the knowledge areas. Each knowledge area has a key concept section, which makes it very clear. It gives you a good overview if you're studying or just want a refresher. It's like, what is risk management all about? You know, oh yes, okay. That gives you some good concepts to think about. And from a study perspective, it's awesome because it helps you hone in on, again, that PMIism, the PMI philosophies that are so important to guide you to answer questions. And that may come up in the sample questions. We'll see. It also has a section in each knowledge area for trends and emerging practices, which is very handy to have. Tailoring considerations. Tailoring is how to modify for small projects, medium projects, large projects. So they'll give a section on tailoring for each knowledge area. And also each knowledge area has considerations for agile and adaptive environments. So if you are working in one of those environments, or perhaps have one project that's agile, one project that's maybe more waterfall, a project that's hybrid. Hybrids are, I would say, almost the rule these days. For most of us, I don't know that most of us have traditional waterfall anymore. They're migrating more toward the hybrid or the agile. That's maybe a good question, and we can talk about that in our next webinar on the in-practice, how we're actually using these methodologies. So those are how the knowledge area structured. Again, very organized, very structured, and it helps you study from a study and also from a reference perspective as well. So now we've got, for those of you who are waiting and taking it after the 26th of March, you've got 2 more processes to learn. It never gets smaller, right? I don't think we've ever had a fewer pages in a new version of a PMBOK guide, but we do have.
Yeah, if anybody, I'm sorry, Diane. If anybody's gotten their new PMBOK guide, they'll notice that the paper's actually thinner.
Yes.
It doesn't make it so heavy. I'm like, I don't know if I like this new paper thing, but you know, I understand why. They'll just keep making it bigger and bigger.
Hey,
yeah,
Diane.
the papers. Yes, go ahead.
We do have a question. It says, do you happen to know the cost of the new PMBOK book?
If you're a PMI member, you can download it for no cost. I don't know off the top of my head what it costs to purchase it outright. I know that if you're a PMI member, you get a discount on the printed version. If you're non-PMI member, then there's one price, and PMI member is second price. So if you want a hard copy, which a lot of people who study like the hard copy, but if you're a member, then you can download it for no cost. You can have both versions available, you know. And you can download the 6th edition now if you're a member, or you can certainly go on the website and purchase it.
I'll see right now. I think the price is, if you just total retail price is, drum roll, where'd it go?
I do a price without checking because it always may change.
I think it's like $70.
Yeah, I was gonna say somewhere in there. So significant cost. So you know, to join PMI,
No.
you know, you
$99.
Oh boy, well that's that more pages, right? If they didn't make the paper a little thinner, you'd never be able to carry it around. It still fits on my bookshelf though, and the bookshelf hasn't fallen down, so it still fits there without bending the bookcase. So besides the adding 2 processes, they changed the knowledge area names in 2 places, and we'll go over those examples. For example, they changed, you know, time, you know, project time management. They changed the schedule. It makes more sense, you know, and we'll talk about those. They renamed, again, well, there's one, the schedule one. And the other one they named, and we'll also talk about these in later slides, they renamed Project Human Resource Management. They renamed Project Resource Management. They just dropped the human. Not that humans aren't important, but we know that resources are both human and physical resources, materials, servers, you know, you're in construction, you've got lumber and cement and rebars. So they make that distinction, and there's a lot of reorganization in the resource area, project resource management area, to make those distinctions. Well, again, we'll go through each knowledge area in detail, but as an overview, this is kind of what changed. And one process was removed. You can see there, project closed procurement, and it was incorporated into the closed project or project phase in integration. And then some of the information was incorporated into the other procurement processes. And then they moved one process, activity resource management, again, reflecting that resources, they kind of put all resources together in the new or renamed project resource management section. So the activity resource moved to project resource management. Same general information, they moved it to group everything together. It had to do with people, resources, so estimating and all that went in one section there. And they added some new processes, but they took one away, so we have a net of 2. And they renamed some processes for consistency. So the new processes are manage project knowledge, added to integration, recognizing that all the documents, all the information that you collect, change, modify, track during a project is important to keep updated and to control. And so they, recognizing that, you added a process there. Control resources was added, and implement risk responses. And we'll talk about some of these others as well as what they renamed when we talk about each knowledge area. So the first 2 are integration and scope. And they added, again, I mentioned above, added manage project knowledge. And so what we wanted to do there is to emphasize the importance of as you may know from previous webinars and studying, and maybe have done some studying for your PMP, the importance of lessons learned. And that is so important, and that's one of the key documents in the managed project knowledge is your lessons learned register, which they're calling it now, lessons learned register. And that the lesson learned register is updated throughout all of the processes, because it's in integration. That makes sense, because the integration touches every other knowledge area and every other process. Business documents are inputs into the developed project charter and the closed project phase. And again, this input into the project charter, and actually saying business documents are input to the project charter. It emphasizes what we talked about earlier, how closely the benefits management is managed by the project manager working with your sponsor and other stakeholders. It's emphasizing the strategic importance of the role of the project manager and the importance of the business case and the business benefits throughout the project. So these are now specified clearly as inputs. And administrative close was moved from the previous closing process, was added to integration. Scope was updated to reflect a strong collaboration with PMI standard for business analysis, called the Business Analysis for Practitioners Practice Guide. They were careful. They didn't want to make duplications, but they wanted it aligned. And again, we're seeing more alignment between the BAs and the project manager. And as you know, there's even a new certification for the business analyst as well. But this close collaboration between the PM and the BA is emphasized in the scope section of the new PMBOK guide. Project schedule management. Well, that was changed. It used to be project time. I think project schedule, that's what PMI thought as well, is that it reflects more what we do as far as we call it schedule in everyday life, right? So it just reflected more closely aligned with what's in practice today. You'll notice in this section some agiles.
Hey, Diane.
Yep. Yes,
Hey,
go ahead.
sorry about that. There was a question that was brought up, and I thought maybe it's worth having a quick little comment. Somebody asked if PMI was kind of following the Microsoft project terms like schedule and resources, and I responded to the individual on the webinar. No, I don't believe so, and the reason I don't believe so is PMI generally doesn't follow somebody else's avenue, and honestly, Microsoft Project has kind of migrated towards more the PMI terms in general. But just for an example, Microsoft Project calls their tool, and when you save one of them, a Microsoft Project Plan, so it's an MPP, which is absolutely a different term in PMI terms. So a project plan is something very different, and what you tend to use Microsoft Project for is for the schedule. So I've always struggled with getting people to understand that the tool gives me my schedule. The tool doesn't give me time, it gives me my schedule, right? So that's why I think time has gotten replaced with schedule, because that's really what you're trying to put together. That's the total output of this knowledge area. And the answer is no, I don't believe that PMI is migrating towards Microsoft Project at all. Plus, we're talking to Project Insight, and that's the tool that we like to use.
Yes, absolutely. There are different schedule different schedule project software out there, and not just one. And so, absolutely. Yeah,
absolutely.
Thanks for that. Okay. Yes, and that again, and I think it reflects again what we really are doing. We're putting schedules together. We're monitoring, controlling, tracking our schedules. Absolutely. And cost, there wasn't, there really kind of updates to format and terms, but there weren't any process or name changes to cost. So it's kind of good news there. Quality, there's really good news here is that the tools were updated based on, they really went out and researched what tools, in the marketplace are used for quality, and merging that with what the PMs do. What's the expectation for a project manager in the real world? What do we do for quality? We're not quality assurance managers for the most part. We may have that training, but most research shows most project managers aren't trained quality assurance professionals. There's a whole separate, group of certification for that, especially in large companies. But they do want to focus on what is important to project managers for managing quality. And the emphasis, I think, is more strong on the quality management plan. So I really think if you're studying after the March 26th date, really focus in more on that quality management plan. The good news is there's a few less things in quality, but again, it's changing focus, and the tools, techniques that they have included are ones that, based on market research, people actually use, project managers actually use to help to manage their projects. And quality assurance was renamed to managed quality, because that's what we really do. We're managing the quality. We're not quality assurance professionals for the most part. You may be certified for that, but it's not. Reality is that most people have a quality assurance, a test group, somebody who's really specialized in those areas and managing that. If you are managing the quality and performing that role, then you're still managed quality works for that as well. Resource, you'll see a lot of bullets on this one, and most of it is renamed activity and rewriting to distinguish between the physical resources that you have and the people or team resources. So a lot of reorganization here to reflect what's going on in there. Again, renaming, taking out the word human to reflect both kinds of resources. Estimate activity resources and is now in this process. Control resources was added because we really, once we identify them and estimate them, we really have to control what's going on. So they added that process because, again, that was kind of missing from before. And then a lot of renaming to reflect like acquire project team is acquire resources, develop team was develop project team, just kind of streamlining things, rename to develop team, and manage project team, manage team. So a little streamlining makes it a little easier to get off your tongue, I guess you could say. So not a lot in the concept areas so much as just reorganizing, renaming things, and streamlining on the resources area. I like the changes here personally. Communication, very subtle, very subtle. They really wanted to emphasize actions versus artifacts. So actions would be something like facilitating a meeting. So that's communication, as opposed to communications, plural, being the outputs. You could think of it meeting minutes. You publicize, could be any kind of document would be a communications, would be an artifact, versus the act of communicating. It's very subtle, and PMI is not going to try to trick you on the exam. They want just to recognize that there's the difference between the two. So I wouldn't worry too much about them trying to trick you. Is it singular or plural? Think of the concepts that they're trying to get across. And again, they renamed control communication. They renamed a lot of the controls to monitor, which is what we usually do. Risk, again, this is another one I really like what they did to risk. They added some things here. They added a concept called overall project risk. Overall project risk, and they augment the individual project risk. So we've got overall project risk and individual project risk. This is the way I've always thought about it, because you have individual risk. When you think of that in a total sum, each individual one may be small, but when you add up a lot of small ones, what happens? Oh my goodness, maybe I've got 50 small, low impact, low cost risks, but when I've got 50 of them, maybe that is important. Let's look at that. Let's look at the overall project risk and what that means to our project. So I really like that concept. So that's one good thing to study, and be aware of the differences between the two and how would you use each concept. Implement risk responses was added, and I really like that because I'm going to say that a lot because I do like a lot of the changes. PMI recognized that once we identify risks, we've got to implement them. And I know I've done several risk webinars for Project Insight, and I've done some risk webinars and seminars on my own for core performance. And what I hear most often is that, well, we identify the risk, but we don't really do much about them. We put them in a register, document them, and then, we might look at them once in a while. And I'm going, oh my goodness. So I know that that's out there, the tendency, and we all kind of get caught up in that. But really, they really are emphasizing that you identify them, quantify, put them in your budget, of course, document them, put your risk register together, and then track, monitor your strategies, implement the strategies. And that's so important. So I'm really happy to see that they're emphasizing that the risks that you identify and that you accept actually need to be implemented. We all know that. So I'm really glad to see that this new process is added to emphasize that. Another thing that is exciting, and I'd like to get your opinion on this, is they added a strategy called escalate to both negative and negative threats as well as opportunity and risk. And I think it's acknowledge what we usually do as well. So we have a new strategy called escalate, and so you can look at that, pay attention to that. There's going to be a little question about that in a couple of minutes, so you might want to think about that. We can talk more about that in practice. How would we use that in practice? That would be a good thing to talk about. And again, control risk was changed to monitor risk. They did that quite a lot. Procurement acknowledges a more global aspect of projects and project managers, and contracts and contract language in the PMBOK used to be more US-centric, and they recognize that, so they tried to make the information a more global perspective. So it emphasizes that, as project managers, we need to know about procurements to make good project decisions. But most of the time, the details of contracts are handled by specialists. And again, unless you are a contract specialist, then you may perform that role. But for the most part, based on their research and the surveys that they sent out, most PMs do not handle the itty-bitty details of the contracts. And so again, what are the concepts that you need to make good decisions about procurements, because they're so important to our projects? So they really looked at the information and moved things to either control procurements in integration or closed project or procurement. And so they moved the information around to really say where it really belonged and streamlined the procurement, which you'll be happy. For those of you struggling with the 5th edition, that's a challenging chapter, so I think they made it a little easier. Stakeholder engagement really focuses on, again, the word engagement, stakeholder engagement. They, in fact, renamed planned stakeholder management to planned stakeholder engagement. We saw this with the exam content outline, the emphasis there on engaging and keeping them engaged throughout the project. Not just at the beginning, because we know their attention span wanes, they have different priorities, but really our job is to keep them engaged throughout the project and put strategies in place to make that happen. And then it was one process renamed there.
Yeah, and I'll jump in on this one again too, Diane, because I think this is a key thing that we've been encouraging and promoting for years is, you know, we have to think strategically, and even jumping back a little bit to your section on communication, you know, I tell project managers all the time is that every single communication you do, you have to think about how you deliver it. And when you're communicating to stakeholders. And if you're communicating to a customer and you're having to give them bad news, you better be talking about how to communicate that to get the result you want. You know, you have to be, because otherwise how you communicate could make somebody less engaged. It may not motivate them to be more engaged. It may make them less engaged. So really thinking through and strategizing every communication and thinking about how that communication impacts your stakeholders' engagement.
Absolutely, and there's a strong connection between stakeholder and communications. Very, very strong connection there, and they, you know, got to work together. All right, so Alexa, we're ready for the first questions to test and see how well they're going to do this morning.
Great. All right.
I think there's going to be a poll up here, poll open, so you can put your answers in, and then Alexa or Diane, can you?
Yeah, definitely.
Where if everybody's done and we can see the results, that's going to be exciting.
Great. Can you see the results there, Diane? So for social,
you should.
No, I don't. Well, I think I need to push some buttons.
Just open up the little poll section, Diane.
Okay.
So for
on your little tab.
12% answered that it is subjective and should be avoidable when possible. 15% answered an IT-centric solution. 27% answered relies on common interests of stakeholders, and 46% answered can promote communications between generations.
Okay. Well, they were kind of, you know, all over the map there. So this is one of those example of a new something that's new. It's in the actual answer. I'll give that is relies on common interest of stakeholders. It's an example of a trend, you know, and they recognizing social computing, social networking as a trend. It's been a trend for a long time, but it just got into the PMBOK guide. So it's a kind of a little tricky there, because this is one of those things that, what is PMI saying? There's a lot of ones that, like D, can promote communication between generations. While it is, I'm sure, absolutely true, and we all, you know, like, what was it, 27% believe, you know, that was a great answer, and it was a great answer. But we want to pick the PMI answer. The one that closely matches what's in the PMBOK guide, which is relies on the common interest of the stakeholders. What they're trying to say is that, you know, when we network, when we come together, we're exploring our interests and kind of finding where we have commonalities. And so based on PMI's new PMBOK 6th, that's the one that's the most correct answer from PMI perspective, although there's some great answers, and certainly it's IT related because you've got to have like your Facebook or your instant message are all IT solutions. But again, you have to pick the best answer that is based on PMI's philosophy and PMBOK guide, which in this case is C, relies on common interests of stakeholders. So I think I got a few of you this morning. Not intentionally, I wanted you all to get it right.
Sure you were. Sure, that's the trick question, Diane.
Okay.
They don't put any trick questions out there, right?
No, we wouldn't want to do that. Question 2 is, when planning risk responses for your project, consider escalation as a strategy when a threat or opportunity is. Again, this is new. And again, it's a PMI. What is PMI?
Diane, I think your audio cut out.
Yes. It did. Well, we'll keep doing the poll here. This is why we have 2 of us. So yes, your audio cut out. Well, everybody take the poll. So when planning risk responses for your project, consider escalation as a strategy when a threat or opportunity is.
Do we have the answers yet?
Yep.
Yeah, you cut out, Diane, so we were kind of filling in for you there.
Oh, so, okay. I don't see. I can't see the button to see the answers. Sorry about that.
That's
so.
Okay.
What's the what are the answers there?
So 23% said specified in project management plan. 28% said outside the scope of the project. 30% came in with documented in the contingency plan, and 19% said difficult to predict.
All right. Well, difficult to predict is definitely true, but it's not the best answer. And we all know that. Again, it's you're planning, and I think it's interesting that during the planning stage that you think of escalation as a strategy, and that's very interesting that they bring that out as one of the strategies during planning. Again, you can plan them at the beginning, but then you refresh, you review them throughout the project. The correct answer is when it's outside the scope of the project. Yeah, that's the correct PMI answer. Specified in the project management plan would be, it's a great answer, and it's usually when all else fails and you can't figure out what it would be. That's kind of a good default answer if you just don't know. It's kind of like my default. Okay, I'm not sure, but that's might be a good one. But in this case, it's not as specific as the correct answer is B. Contingency plan is a strategy. It's a technique, but it's not one of the responses that to choose from. So be outside the scope of the project. So what they're really saying is that there's things that you can control as a project manager, and there's things that are outside. So an example might be maybe there's another project out there which is taking all your resources. There's a higher priority. You can't control that, but you can definitely escalate and say, we've got a problem here. There's something outside of my project, like another project, which is maybe got a higher, maybe taking more resources, maybe got a higher priority, and it's impacting my project. So in that case, we escalate. I think we all do escalation, but again, think of how PMI is defining escalate as opposed to maybe what you do in your own practices. So these are, I thought that might be the hardest one, but yeah. All right, so don't feel bad because there's a lot of close answers, but part of taking the exam is learning the best choice and why it's the best choice. If you didn't get it quite right, think of what can I do to make the best choice, and again, read the PMBOK guide very, very carefully and understand the concepts. All right, we got one more try. We'll see how this one goes. This may be a little long, so I'm going to read it. You are the PM for a new financial system and want to use a form of rolling wave planning for your project. which is using an agile approach. One scheduling method you are considering is iterative scheduling with a backlog, WS with the planning packages to show backlog, on-demand scheduling, pulling work from a backlog, or Kanban system.
So I think a lot more people are certain of this answer here.
We'll see, right? What did they pick?
So the majority came in with iterative scheduling with a backlog.
Iterative. Okay. What percent? Do we have a percent on that one?
Yeah, that's 53%, 18% with WBS with planning packages, and 22% on-demand scheduling, 7% the Kanban system.
Okay, so I didn't fool the majority today. Yes, you're absolutely right. Iterative scheduling. I thought that maybe with a backlog would have fooled you. So here's an example of a trend, and it's also an example of agile and adaptive. Now, rolling wave planning is not new. What they're doing is they're melding rolling wave planning, which is not a new concept, into agile. So actually, the iterative schedule with a backlog is a type of rolling wave planning. So they've kind of expanded and included agile concepts, the new with new to the PMBOK guide with rolling wave planning, which is not new. So that I picked this one because it was a good meld between the two. And a Kanban, just for example, is on the exam content outline. So that's been around as a question, potential question, since 2015. So Kanban is not a new concept. I just thought I'd throw that out there. On-demand scheduling is a different type of approach, but it's not a rolling wave approach according to the PMBOK guide. And WBS, I just made that one up. Planning packages are part of the WBS, but you know, I kind of made that choice up myself. So not a bad question. So that brings us to a summary for today, and we gave you an overview of some of the changes and our little commentary on what we think they might mean, the impact to you and your PMI certification, the importance of putting a timeline together, and ways to incorporate the updates into your PM practices. Now, at this point in time, if you have questions, we have just a couple minutes left, but what we like to do is to have you put questions in the chat, and then we'll incorporate that in the next webinar, which will talk more strategies and more practical application than the theory. And if we, especially for questions we don't have time to get into today, put them in the chat, and then we will address them in the next webinar and continue our conversation on how we can use the information in your practices as well as getting your certification.
Great.
So with that, I'm finished.
Thank you, Diane and Diane. So we do have just a couple more slides for you. Let's see. Let me get my screen back up here. So for those of you on social media, I'd like to invite you to follow, like, and subscribe to our social media channels. Our handle on Twitter is @ProjectInsight. And you can also find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube for the latest in PI and project management news. And in our Project Insight community, you'll find many recorded videos and webinars for you to watch and learn from. You can sign up for your next project management webinar, or you can register for more by visiting our webinar calendar. And that's all we have for you today. We'd like to thank both our presenters for a great session, and of course, our audience for your time as usual. We hope to have you on board for our next webinar. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.